Here it is, a top 10 list for the hottest Pokemon. Now this is based off the Pokédex entries, not necessarily feats from the show or anything. This is just based off of what you can, read. Here's a little addendum. I'm not including anything with the electric types, because some people would argue, well, lightning is 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That is somewhat arguable, but at the same time, that static shock you get when you have wool socks and walk around on a carpet, that can be 500 to 5,000 degrees technically. But obviously it's super short-lived. It's in a very limited space. So nobody would call that like, oh, how hot is this room? And then you go static shock something and you go, oh, it's 500 degrees in here. That is why I'm not including the electric BS. Okay? That's simple. Now let's go through the entries. This is number 10, Numel. The magma of almost 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit courses through its body. All the Pokédex entries are in Fahrenheit, so when I have to extrapolate, I also include it in Fahrenheit. So 2,200 degrees. That is actually, in fact, capable of liquefying rock. You actually only need about 1,500 degrees to liquefy rock. So lore-wise, makes perfect sense. Now, this does have an evolution, of course. And you see in the evolution, it does not specify anything except for it can have molten lava, which at the lower end is only, as I said, 1,500 degrees. So it doesn't actually specify that this is hotter than the previous form. That is why I can't really go with it. So that's just a little explanation of why the evolution is not necessarily hotter than the previous form. Here we go, number 9. Darmanitan. Internal fire burns at 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty simple, straightforward. Interestingly enough, iron melts at about 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. So while it can destroy a dump truck in one punch, it actually cannot melt it. Just a little interesting tidbit. Colossal. It burns at 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, some of you might look at the name and say, well, coal doesn't burn that hot. Right, so coal in your grill will not burn that hot. Under the right conditions, you can actually burn coal at up to 3,500 degrees. So, again, it actually works. Larvesta. The fire Larvesta spouts from its horn can cut right through a sheet of iron. Iron melts at about 2,800 degrees. So, therefore, if it can cut right through iron, it is minimum 2,800 degrees. Because depending on how quickly it's cutting through it, that might indicate a much higher temperature. But I'm only going off with the entry, and just to keep everything fair, I'm assuming the low-end temperature for everything, which is why this does not beat out the next entry, Flareon. Now, this says over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm just basically saying 3,000. I mean, technically, infinite temperature is also over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but we're going to keep it again, always assuming the low end, 3,000 degrees. This would not be in anybody's guess for the top 10. But here she is. Pyroar. Actually, got to look at the males here. And we see the mane of the male Pyroar heats to over 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit during battle. Merely approaching it will cause severe burns. Yeah, definitely will. That is extremely hot. Obviously hot enough to melt rock, iron. Chi-Yu controls flames burning at over 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit. Casually swims through a sea of lava it creates by melting rock and sand. Now that's a little bit interesting. 5,400, more than enough to melt rock and sand. That's definitely true. But it says it casually swims through the sea of lava it creates. But if you look at the height and the weight, that doesn't make any sense. Because this would actually be a lot less dense than the rock and sand that it melted. So it should actually float. There is a little bit of plausibility in that it could maybe leave the top above it more solid and kind of swim bouncing off the top, or it can just swim downwards to counteract the buoyancy. But I'd be hesitant to call that a casual swim. Yeah, really this should be a much heavier Pokemon in order to be neutrally buoyant through rock. But hey, what do I know? Okay, in the number 3 spot, We have Skeledirge. Burns enemies up to the same 5,400 degrees. The other one can swim through rocks. Surely this one could. Although I believe being based off like a crocodile would be more likely to be an ambush predator. So I'm wondering if it does the same thing where it would sit under the rock most of the way and pounce out. Okay, moving into number 2. Delphox. Using psychic powers, it generates a fiery vortex of, once again, 5,400 degrees. So I get that all these are kind of in the same area. So how did I sort the 5,400 degrees? So it is kind of arbitrary, and basically I just went through and they're just kind of in order of Pokédex if they have the same temperature. This is one thing I don't fully understand. Why the stick on fire? Because wood does not burn at 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you have that psychic power, that I don't know what the stick's giving you. Moving on to the number 1, and I feel like most people probably already know this. Magcargo. It's kind of infamous. Some people did some not very good calculations saying that it would vaporize the whole planet and all that. I think that's pretty doubtful. I mean, don't get me wrong. Being near 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit would definitely cause some issues. It does say that's its body temperature, but, I mean, keep in mind, humans don't have a uniform body temperature. So that might only be one spot that's 18,000 degrees. All that aside, no matter what, 18,000 degrees is on its own level. It is a tier above all the others in terms of temperature. So that is our number 1. I do want to add one honorable mention to the hottest Pokemon. This one, temperature-wise, maybe not on the list, but I think it deserves a mention anyway. Hey guys, did you know that in terms of male, human, and female